Hi, everybody, and welcome to Realty Success. We're so excited today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brooke Bryant. I'm a realtor in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the surrounding area. And I co host this show with my friends every week. And I'm also an author. I've written a book called The Ultimate Guide for First Time Home Buyers. I do love working with first time home buyers, real estate clients of all type. But I just thought first time home buyers needed a little guidance. So I've written that. And I'm so excited today to be joined by a fellow realtor. His name is Aaron Brown. Hey, Aaron, how are you?
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited. I'm a realtor out of San Antonio, Texas, and really looking forward to today. Really excited about our guest today.
We are so excited to have you here. And also joining us is our friend Angela Brown, who helps us get all these homes ready for the market. Hey, Angela.
Hey, thanks so much for having me here today. I am the author of The Ultimate Guide to Move In, Move Out Cleaning. And we all know that you have to clean before you can sell a home. And I'm so excited to be sharing this information with you. And so if you have any questions, jump into the comments and ask them. And again, thanks guys for having me here today. I'm really glad to be and excited to be here to join you.
Yeah, we're excited too because we have a super awesome guest today. Her name is Brie Schmidt. Brie is a realtor in the Chicago area, and she's going to talk to us today about some really neat real estate investing opportunities and strategies. Brie, welcome to Realty Success.
Thanks for having me.
We're so excited. So you've been tell us about your start in real estate, how you came to be in the wonderful world of real estate.
So I actually have a really interesting story. I've been licensed since 2004. So my parents were getting divorced. They were selling their house. The agent came over. I was 17 years old. I remember coming home from school and she was talking to my parents and we started chatting. And like a few hours later, we're still talking. And she's like, you know what? You were born to be a realtor. You have to come work for me. And so I didn't go to college because I was like, well, I'll be a realtor. That's what I'm going to do with my life. And so in my state, you had to be 21 to be licensed. So I waited. I worked side jobs and worked for her part-time until I was 21. Took my courses before I even turned 21. Took my test like the day I turned 21. I was so excited. I absolutely hated it. I hated it. I quit within the first 9 months. I did not like it at all. And had to kind of start over my whole life plan because that's what I always thought I was going to do. Really found it tough being 21 years old, advising someone on how to buy their home. So I really found it hard to get clients to trust me being so young. But additionally, like they were speaking a totally different language than I was talking. They were talking about how the house made them feel and, paint colors. And, it went right over my head. And I would just, smile and nod and then want to talk about like cost per square footage and, the value of the property. And it was just a huge communication disconnect. So I left after 9 months, kept my license active though, in case I ever needed it for something. And about almost 10 years later, I have to do math now. 7 years later, decided to do my first property, which was a house hack. So I kind of reinvigorated my passion for real estate, was able to use my license for myself. Bought a property in 2011 to house hack. And then over the next 3 years, I ended up buying another 28 properties and became a full-time real estate investor and started my brokerage firm, Second City Real Estate.
That is super incredible. I'm blown away. How on earth did you acquire that many properties that quickly?
Obsession would maybe be the word. Um, It was, the first property we bought, we waited about almost a year and a half before we bought a second one. And then this property came on the market. And I said, we had just closed on our 3 unit in January. It was now like maybe 6 weeks later. And my husband showed me this property and said, I really want to go see this. I'm like, we just bought a house 6 weeks ago. We do not have the money to buy this house. And it was from like original 1970s, but it was in a really, really good neighborhood, but it needed a lot of work. So logically thinking it was a terrible decision. And I said, no, the house went under contract, no big deal. And then a couple weeks later, the house came back on the market and I'd had a message the agent and said, just let me know if something comes up. he had messaged me and said, the house is coming back in the market. Do you want to see it? And I told my husband, he's like, I definitely want to see it. Like, again, we're really not in the best position financially to take this project on, but let's go see it. And we fell in love with it. So we were one of 30 offers on it. We ended up getting the house. I ended up renovating it and putting probably $60,000 on credit cards. Those 0% interest credit card checks just to furnish our renovation. We moved into the house when it was half done. We had no kitchen. We couldn't walk on the whole first floor. It was another 2 months of renovation while we lived there. It was terrible, but we were able to pull out a substantial amount of equity on the property. And then we were able to use that to catapult our real estate investing.
Well, for the people that are just joining us and they're not familiar with the term house hacking, tell us what house hacking is and explain a little bit about why it intrigued you from just going from regular real estate sales to going, wait a second, this is going to be my new lifestyle.
So you're right. House hacking is a lifestyle, just like I think most real estate investing in general is a lifestyle. So house hacking is when you buy a property, typically a multi-unit, typically 2 to 4 unit residential assets, which means 2 to 4 unit properties, you can get long-term 30-year fixed regular conventional financing. So the idea is you buy a 2 to 4 unit property, you live in one unit, rent out the others, and then you have a 1-year occupancy requirement. Once you're done with that 1 year, you can go buy another one. And as of November 18th, they just launched with Fannie Mae a new 5% down program that allows you to do up to 10 loans with 5% down on 2 to 4 unit properties. So that's going to be huge for our area of business because you could literally buy 10 properties in 10 years with 5% down and just build your portfolio that way by moving from building to building.
But you have to live in them while
For
you're
1 year.
renovating them for 1 year. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to move in within 60 days and you have to occupy it or intend to occupy it for 12 months.
So you said that most of the properties are multifamily. Is that the type of property that is best suited for house hacking? And what does your portfolio look like? Are you more duplexes, triplexes? What types of properties do you have?
So
and
here
do you find are best?
So here in Chicago, we call them flats. I don't know why, but we call them 2 flats, 3 flats, and 4 flats. So for us, a duplex is a totally different meaning than a 2 units. It's just easier to house hack a multi-unit because it gives you your own space. And then you have additional separate space for your tenants. Not all markets have a lot of 2 to 4 units, or they're in what we would call C-class areas. So it doesn't really work. You can't just house hack one property a year in every single market because it really depends on your housing stock. Another thing you can do is a lot of properties might have an ADU unit. So like an casita, right? Or a small guest house in the back you can rent out. Or some units have finished basements with kitchens that you can Airbnb. Those are all ways that you can house hack. But the goal is to utilize long-term fixed financing that's owner occupied so you get the best terms, and then keep moving through the programs so that you're able to stack up and accumulate a large portfolio. So my properties are all mixed. I don't own any. Mine are all 3s or 4s.
Gotcha.
That's super incredible. In terms of the financing for them, talk to us just a little bit about how you stack that and how you roll that financing every year for the ones of the people who are looking to get into it.
Sure, there's a lot. So if you're not going to own it, you can also, buy investment properties without occupying them. With single family homes, that would be a 20% down payment. With multifamilies, 2 to 4 unit properties, it requires 25% down. So this rollout of this 5% down program is really going to open up a lot of the doors to being able to house hack more for clients because the minimum payment is so much lower. There's also an FHA option. But FHA has something called the self-sufficiency test that is applicable on 3 and 4 unit properties. And at least in my market, a lot of properties do not pass self-sufficiency. So I probably analyze for my clients, let's say 2,000 properties a year. I might find one that passes FHA self-sufficiency and qualifies for that program.
So when you say you analyze properties, what is the process of analyzing a property?
That's a great question. For me, it's quite quick. So I've been doing this now for 12 years. So I have literally every single property in the north side of Chicago that's come on the MLS. I get an alert 3 times a day. And 3 times a day, I run numbers on every single property for the last 12 years. So for me, it's very intuitive, if that makes sense. I can click through pictures real fast. I can tell you within, probably 2-3 minutes if the rents are current rents, if they're market rents, if there's what sort of renovations you would need to do, if the rents are too low, or if you could do renovations to increase the rents, what sort of capital expenditure budget. So it's really important to be working with, if you're if you're any investor, to be working with an investor agent. So it's a different beast when you're dealing with realtors. Investor agents typically are more experienced with investors and can help run these sort of numbers for you. Things like, CapEx, repairs, vacancy, estimating renovation costs. So it's a little bit different than a retail side of the agencies.
So, of all of the properties that you've been involved in, how often do you personally, you and your family, how often do you move from one property to the next, or do you not do that anymore?
I don't do that anymore. I've got 2 small children. Are you kidding me?
Right? I was like,
Because
wow,
it's got to be hard to move every year. So
yeah.
No. Interestingly enough, the first property we bought, said we lived there for about 2 years before we moved into the third property, which was the renovation. Lived there for a few years. I actually ended up turning that into an Airbnb and moved back to the first property for a few years before we ended up buying a single family house. So I've only lived in 3 of the properties.
good for you. At least you don't have to move every year.
Yeah,
No.
that would be a lot.
Insane.
So I guess the goal is then for your investors to start off like you did and to owner occupy for a period of time and then get to the point where they get the financing where they don't have to constantly be moving.
Yeah, I would say so. Most of my clients in the Chicago market, at least, typically do 2 or 3 house hacks before they decide to get a single family house. Typically, they'll still move with like 1 kid, but once they're pregnant with their second, typically they tend to settle down into a more permanent house and then stop house hacking. But before, we didn't have this 5% down program available. It literally just came out a couple of weeks ago. So before that, you could typically only do, an FHA with 3.5% down. There was a 10% down, or it was 20% down. So you really didn't have the ability to move every year because you had to acquire such a large down payment. Now that this 5% down program is available and you can use it multiple times, that's going to really open up the doors for multiple house hacks for a lot of people.
Is that to encourage people to purchase homes that they can house hack during the higher interest rates?
I don't know. There was a program similar through Fannie Mae that went away, and it would change drastically in 2019. So that was the primary program that we used. But that program required that it was your first purchase and you can only use it once. So if you already owned property, you couldn't use that program. And then you couldn't use it again. So I was actually quite surprised to hear that this new program that just came out, you can use it up to 10 times per person. So if it's a husband and wife, they can each do it 10 times.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty new in our world, at least, of house hacking financing. It's the first time there's ever been a program that you can use multiple times with low money down.
I would call that investment hacking.
Right? Yeah. Right.
Just out of curiosity, in order to qualify for that, what are some of the qualifications?
It's standard conventional financing.
Okay. Really?
It's a
Okay.
standard conventional program, same qualifications if you were to buy a single family house with Fannie Mae.
Wow. And this will work on a duplex, fourplex,
Yeah.
flat?
And
Sorry, would you call
flat.
it
Oh, flats.
flats?
yeah, that's so
Okay.
British.
It is
So
so British.
it is so British. It sounds kind of fancy. So most of the properties that you have that you're purchasing, I guess if you're using conventional financing, are you doing a lot of distressed properties or no? Is that an appeal for you to find distressed properties and then renovate them for your house hacking or no?
That's a great question. Me personally, I don't. I've done a few renovation projects. It is always so stressful. No matter who you know or how experienced you are, the whole renovation project is overwhelming, right? So I prefer not to do them, not only because I don't like the stress of it, but also because my money is put to better use buying more turnkey properties and then more of them. So I'll just use an example. Say you have, I'm just going to use 20% down, right? Say you had $200,000 cash, right? You could buy a $500,000 property, spend $100,000 cash as a down payment, and then another $100,000 renovating it. So your all in is 600, and let's say it's worth $700,000. So your upside is 100,000, or you can buy $1 million of property or two apartment buildings for $500,000, that same capital, and get double the cash flow. And remember, these tenants are paying down your mortgage. So at the end of the day, you're going to yield a much better return by applying that capital over two properties versus renovating just one. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's good math.
I'm trying to do it in my head right now. So I think it pans
You did
out.
good.
So again, it depends on the person, right? What their goal is, what their strategy is. The market has been quite tight, as you guys know, even the last 5 or 6 years. So one of the metrics that we used to be able to use was like a 70% all in. So if you're all in with 700, you would expect the property to be worth $1 million, right? 30% profit. Even in the last, 5, 6 years, you're lucky to see 85% all in. So the margins are much smaller now, and you have to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze. Are you going to get enough out of that property by doing the renovations? And do you have the right contacts and are experienced enough to make sure that you don't run into, overages, right? Surprises, those sort of things, because that almost always happens on properties.
So true. I'm assuming that's one of the reasons why you did an Airbnb, get that extra cash flow coming in on one of your properties.
Yeah. And you know what? I would never do that again.
Tell us and not to get off topic, but tell us just a little bit about that, because we run into people daily here, at least in my state, Texas, where everyone's like, "Oh, we want to do the Airbnb, and grow our portfolio." Talk to us just a little bit about that.
It's a cool buzzword. I think that people think, they watch the Instagram influencers who talk about things like arbitrage. So arbitrage is when you essentially you rent a property from a landlord, right? So say I'm renting it from you for $1,500 as a regular tenant. I will pay you $1,700 for that unit, and then I will put it on Airbnb and keep the difference. So everyone wins. That is a no money down way of getting into real estate investing. First, you have to be really aware of regulations. So I know, at least in the Chicago market, we came out, I think it was 2019, 2017, maybe. They released a new Airbnb ordinance. And part of that ordinance was that you could not do Airbnb unless it was your unit. But they never enforced it. So for years and years and years, you could buy a 2 to 4 unit property. As long as you only had one per address on Airbnb, you could live upstairs and, Airbnb the downstairs. Then about a year and a half ago, they caught wind that like, hey, this ordinance was written that you can't do that. And they just started delisting properties. They were not renewing licenses. And you had to prove that it was your unit, not your unit in the building, but your personal unit. And that it was limited to, I think, like, I don't know, maybe 50 months or 50 nights a year or something like that. So all these people had, sunk all this money into their Airbnbs, furnishing them, right, building up profiles, and Chicago just wiped them out. So you have to definitely be aware of your local ordinances. I had already sold my property before that started, and we had moved. We knew that we were going to buy a single family house. So we had moved into, we lived in a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 5,000 square foot house, just me and my husband. We didn't need that space. So we decided to move to our 3-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. and save up money while we looked for a single family house and then Airbnb it. So our house was really awesome, especially in the winter time, because it was so big that we would get, like, over Thanksgiving weekend, we would get large families that would come through. Anything with the holidays, that we had a lot of Girl Scout troops that would rent our place out and do sleepovers, which I thought was really cool. So we actually we were pretty booked with, I think our biggest months were like June, July, August. We would bring in, let's say, $13,000 to $15,000 a month.
Wow.
And then winters, January, February were terrible. It was more like probably $2,000, $3,000 a month. But even with a full-time manager that managed it for you, it's very, very time. It takes a lot of time. We've had someone that tried to steal our washer dryer from the 3rd floor. So they got it like halfway down the staircase and decided it was too heavy and left it. I stopped by one day to check on something, and people had some sort of cigar party. All the floors were covered in cigar ash. There was like cigar butts all over my house. We had someone steal our TV. So like, just like all of our stuff got damaged. We had to throw out all the furniture that we bought. So it's not, I'm glad I did it to try it, but it's not something that I would personally want to do again.
How do you balance investment versus renovations when you are working on a renovation project for house hacking?
You have to look at the before and the after, right? So the calculation that we use in investing is cap rate. So your cap rate is essentially your net operating income, so your rent minus expenses, divided by the purchase price. So you have to understand what the cap rate is in your market. So in my market, an average cap rate is, let's say, 6%. So if a property needs renovations, I want to see that cap rate after you're done and what the market rents are going to be. It's got to be at least a 6.5%. Because if it's going to end up being closer to a 6, why would you put all that time and energy when you can buy something retail and get the same return? So that's one of the things that an investor agent can help you figure out is, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? And if you're going to be putting, if it's a renovation or a major renovation project, you definitely want to see that above a 7% cap rate to make it worth your while.
So you mentioned in your market that things are pretty tight. I'm in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. Same here. We've seen such an influx of people moving from other parts of the country. We've also
That's where I would
seen,
move. If
yeah,
my business ever tanks in Chicago, I would probably move to Charlotte. I think it's wonderful.
it's beautiful and it's
Yeah.
great, but it's been really hard for smaller investors here because so many larger investors are coming in and buying up lots of properties. Flipping just became really huge here. Are you seeing that in your market? Is it really hard I would think house hacking is a good way for people to start in their investment career because they can do it in a financially manageable way where they're living there also. So I think that's a great way to do it, to be competitive with these big guys who are coming and gobbling up a lot of properties.
It depends on the market. Chicago is quite a unique market where we're a city of neighborhoods. So there's 77 neighborhoods in Chicago. At least the north side neighborhoods where I work, some of them, the range, the housing stock between 50 and 70% are small 2 to 4 unit properties. So you walk down the block and literally like every other house is a small apartment building. So it makes it really easy to house hack here. Boston's kind of the same. Milwaukee's the same. San Francisco. So there are other markets that have this sort of housing stock mix that make it beneficial, but inventory is still very tight. It's been a really wild couple of years, to be perfectly honest. When COVID happened, at least in Illinois, we got banned from showing any properties that had tenants. So if there was a tenant in your building, we couldn't show your property. I believe until maybe like May or June was when that ban was lifted. So our whole spring market, like we had no business because no landlord could list their buildings unless they vacated it. And no one was going to want to buy a vacant building in the beginning of COVID. So like our business completely halted and was just essentially just shut down for months. And then ever since then, it just went, it went crazy. And now we're seeing, we're still here offering 30, 40, 50 grand over asking price and still getting outbid.
That's a crazy, crazy market. Yeah, that's crazy.
I'll tell you, we had one. My clients offered $80,000 over asking price and we got outbid. Someone went $150,000 over asking price. $150,000 over asking price. It was insane.
These for multifamily units?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. What class of multifamily do you guys typically go after?
It's typically A, B type areas.
Okay, wonderful. So a lot quicker turnaround, less money in.
Yep.
Good.
Most people tend to want properties that don't need a ton of renovation.
Hmm.
So they can just, save up for the next down payment and go to the next one.
Well, usually a little better neighborhoods and areas too, as well, right? So,
Hmm.
do you guys do any value add on those properties when you guys purchase, or?
So it depends on the property, depends on the strategy. As long as the numbers make sense. Like I've got one right now, for example, I said we use cap rates to determine our market.
Mhm.
It's a 6% cap rate. It's listed for $800,000. It needs about $100,000 of work. And then after it's going to be worth, so you're all in for 9. It should be worth a little over $1 million. And it would be just under a 7% cap rate. So like it's a home run, deal for us. It makes 100% sense
Yeah.
to do those sort of numbers and then get another $150,000 of equity.
Is it easier to get financing for multifamily?
Not necessarily. It's the same as a single family house, really.
Okay.
Same exact terms.
The same exact terms. They don't look at rent coming
Yeah,
in or anything like that, or?
correct. You can use 75% of the rent
Okay,
towards your approval. So you can actually get approved for a higher property value.
that's what I thought. So I'm assuming a lot of the ones you take over already have tenants, or you kick them out and upgrade and then get new tenants
Depends.
at a higher rate? Depends
It
on the
really
project, right?
depends. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't just kick tenants out. So you're required
To follow through with
to
the leases in place, right?
yes,
For however
yes,
long
yes,
those
yes.
are.
So it's one of the stupidest things I see is that owners they'll sign 1 to 2 year leases. I've even seen some sign like 3-year leases and then put it in the market. I'm like, what do you want us to do with that?
Yeah.
Unless you're going to buy a tenant out, there's really nothing we can do with that property legally. And so it just really comes down to the tenants. I had a clients about a year ago came to me. They wanted to sell their property and they're thinking about spring market. Really, our winter market is quite dead because no one wants to move in winter for leases. So most landlords don't do lease ups over winter months anyways. So it's hard to sell a building if it's fully leased. And I told them, don't re-sign your leases, just go to month. And then when spring came, they decided to keep the building. So they re-signed all the leases. And then a few months later, they decided to sell again. So I tried to sell it maybe in October. We had 19 showings the first day. So in 2 hours, I had 19 showings, people that came through. We got 6 offers on the property, one being about $40,000 over asking price. But 5 of those offers were all owner occupied. So we had to go ask the tenants, offer them a couple $1,000s to move. They said no, and there was really nothing we could do about it. So we had to pull the house off the market. We had to deliver the tenants notice of non-renewal. And when they're up in April, then we can put the house back in the market and try all over again.
Oh, I hate stuff like that.
The
Yeah.
joys of real estate.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some dead markets, and you also mentioned the pandemic and how it kind of slowed things to a grinding halt. What do you do as a house hacker when you're invested in a whole lot of properties and the market dies on you?
Well, if you mean like valuation of market,
I mean, like, how do you finance? Like, what happens to your finances?
well, nothing really, because your mortgage is a 30-year fixed.
But you
So
still
as
have
long
to
as
pay it, even if nobody's renting out any of the properties, right?
yeah, that would be a big vacancy issue. Not really like so if there's a market crash and property values go down, most investors are in this for the long term. So like a lot of us just don't pay attention to the short ups, ups and downs, because it really doesn't matter. If I'm not planning on selling it for 15 years, I really don't care what the value of the property is now.
Okay.
Mortgages are fixed for 30 years. So you want to make sure that that you can handle a vacancy, right? But if you've got a 3-unit building, chances are not all 3 units will be vacant at the same time. And when we're
Okay.
running our numbers and our due diligence, we're putting money aside for vacancy. So that if there is a vacancy, let's say you need to renovate a unit, it's going to take 2 months. You should have that money budgeted off to the side to cover those bills ahead of time and plan for that expense.
So when you're working with your, so you have a big portfolio of homes that you own personally, and then you have clients that you work with to help them build their portfolios, right?
Yep.
So most of the clients that you work with and yourself, you do buy and hold these homes long term. You're not. Do you take advantage of peaks in the market where, wow, I could really sell this, or is it more advantageous for you to hold on to the property as for rental income?
Most hold on to it. So said I've been doing this. I started my firm about almost 10 years ago. In that 10 years, let's say I've done personally like 200 purchases. I think of my personal clients, I've had maybe 5 sell of 200.
Wow.
Most are keeping them for the long-term hold. And the few that have sold, generally it's always when you have that second kid. The first kid seems to be easy, but once you get the second kid, I've got 2 listings right now that are both, so of those 5, 2 are my current listings. Both same situation. One just had their second kid and they moved about an hour away to be closer to family. And they didn't want to be driving into the city or like having to deal with repairs. And the other one just found out they're pregnant with their second kid. Also just moved maybe a half an hour away to be closer to family. And both decided to sell rather than keep the properties long term. But they've had them for 5 and 6 years at this point. So it really just depends. But most people are in it for the long term.
It's a good way to invest.
Yeah.
So the management aspect of it, you mentioned it with your Airbnb, and then just having that many properties. Do you have an in-house property management company? Do you outsource it? Is that a really stressful part of the business for you, managing all of these properties?
It is.
And give us a little inside scoop on the property management side of things, because I would think it's kind of a lot.
It is a lot. I've done both. I had an in-house team. I originally started building out my in-house team, and then I decided that I was going to outsource it. And it's tough. We've had 3 property managers this year, to be honest. We were with our property manager for 6 years-ish. Things, weren't up to what they had used to be. So we decided to leave. We went with a different company. Within the first month, I fired them. It was very apparent very early on this was not going to work for me. So then we went to another one, and we've been with them since summer, and it's not going very well either. So it's a tough business, to be honest. And it's always ups and downs. You can find a great one for 6 years, and then sometimes you'll have 4 in a year. You just got to kind of go with the flow.
Well, the employment issues have been, it's just tough to get and keep good employees. And so I imagine that has an impact on property management as well. But like, what could you tell potential investors? Here's what you need to look out for. Here's what makes a good property manager. Here's run away.
You know what? It's hard to say. Because the ones that you should run for are probably lying to you anyways in the beginning. So, they might try to sell you the sunshine and rainbows. The ones that we had for 6 years, the thing I most respected about them, we had problems. Of course, there was screw ups. There was, things that happened. Was I loved that they took responsibility. So if I said something to them like, hey, I noticed this is going on or this is falling behind, they would be like, you know what? You're right. Can you give us some time to research the issue and come back to you with the resolution? They'd ask for like a week or so. They'd go back through their records, and they'd either come back and say, you know what, we think you're right. Here's what we're going to do to resolve it. Or here's how we're going to change our process so it doesn't happen again. It wasn't about like refunding my money necessarily. Or they would come back to me and say, you know what, you're kind of right. Here's where we think you need to adjust your expectations. But it was a candid adult conversation, right? So I loved that aspect of my property manager because I knew that we could work through absolutely anything, regardless of the issue, because everyone was being adults about it and we handled it like adults. So that's my, my golden standard. For example, this last property manager that we're working with now, I sent her a list of, I don't want to call them grievances, but we've had vacancies since August. I had to ask for them to be listed on Zillow or Hotpads, any of the major sites. They're only showing them for 1 hour a week. And then I sent in a request to see one of the apartments and no one responded for 3 weeks. And so I sent her a list of like, hey, I want to talk with you about your process because here's what I see and I want to discuss how we can make changes. And she absolutely refused to have a conversation with me. And her response was that this was our way of doing things. If you don't like it, hire someone else. I'm like, then I'm obviously going to have to. There was no adult conversation, right? And so that's just not someone that I can work with, right? It all comes down to that communication.
When you're putting together a proposal to work with a property manager, are you the one that sets the initial expectations or do you expect them to do that?
They typically have a process, right? I don't want to disrupt their process. If they said every property manager has a communication system, whether that's through a portal, right? There's a system usually in place. Like if repairs are over a certain amount of dollar, they need approval, right? I want to understand their system and see if that works for me and how I like to do things. I don't want them to change and like make an exception for how I want things done. But I also want to understand, right, how's the communication on their end? Because that's been a problem with the people that we fired after 30 days is they were very siloed, if that makes any sense. There was a maintenance guy, there was a leasing person, there was but no one talked to each other. So when I'd ask a question, like they thought the other person was responding and like no one responded for 2 weeks. So I'd ask the question again, like no one really knew what anyone else was doing. So there was no like team collaboration, which made it very difficult to work with them. So those are all things you want to feel out, right? And everyone's different. One of my business partners, he never reads anything. I'd be shocked if I send him monthly reports and breakdowns and everything, and he probably maybe reads one a year. He's extremely hands off. He doesn't really care. Same thing, like I invest in some syndications. I'm pretty hands off. I get an email every month, and every 3 months I'll probably log in and see what they're talking about, but I'm pretty hands off with that investment.
Brie, maybe we could back up for just a half second and tell kind of our viewers what specifically property management companies are responsible for. We get a lot of people asking like, oh, they do everything, right? Can I live in New York and get a property in Texas? Or
you could. Absolutely.
So, yeah, maybe you could talk about that for just a half sec, kind of clear that up for some of our viewers.
Sure. All companies are different with how they charge things as well and how they're set up for management. But generally speaking, you could absolutely live in New York and buy a property in Texas and have a property manager run it. Their job generally encompasses any sort of renovation on the property that needs to be done. So they will coordinate either their in-house team or outsource contractors or subs, and then usually present you with options of billing. They require do all the leasing up. So marketing your unit, finding tenants, collecting rent, managing day-to-day repairs. They may or may not even handle the sale of the property whenever you're ready for that. So they should be like your hands off. If you want to be a hands off investor, your property manager should be able to handle all that stuff. There's also a la carte ones that I've seen. So there was actually one in Chicago for a while that, you could only do management with them. Or if you only wanted repairs done, right? Or if you only wanted leasing done, they would segment it so that you didn't have to pay a monthly fee. You could just hire the services that you wanted. So I've seen those around too.
That's really neat. Yeah, incredible.
Of the property management companies that you've worked with, what did you like best about the ones that you worked with?
Again, open communication. Again, it's a tough business, right? I think if anyone thinks they're going to get into landlording or real estate investing and it's going to be a cakewalk, it's not. We've had tenants burn down our house. I've had a 4-unit burn down. I've had my garage lit on fire. I've had tenants who absolutely refused to do any sort of bed bug treatment and kept reinfecting the house, where we had to vacate the entire house, tent it, and then treat it, and then tent it again and treat it again, and then pay someone to go sleep in the house overnight to see if we got bed bugs again. Literally I had to pay them a couple $100 because like no one wanted, who wants to go sleep in a
Yeah,
vacant house and see if you
who's
get
going to
bit?
take that job?
Right. I
So
would love to
the
see the
only
ad
way
that you
to-
wrote for that job.
It was such a bad case of bed bugs that there's nothing else we could do. So
I will
it
pay
is-
you. I will pay you $200 to sleep in a house that might have bed bugs.
yeah, and then infect your house, right? Burn those clothes while you're at it. So I mean, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very, very difficult job. So again, it really comes down to communication, and trust, right? I want to trust that you're making the best decisions for me. The manager that we worked with for 6 years, said by the end of the last couple of years, they really didn't call me for anything because they knew what my answer was going to be, and there's a lot of things that aren't really worth my time. Meaning if a tenant's furnace goes out, right, at 8 o'clock at night, you need to handle that. Why are you calling me to authorize a repair? Of course they have to have heat. So that's not something that you should be bothering me with when we have to fix it regardless or put them up in a hotel. So those are decisions that I don't need to really be involved with. Now, if it's something like, hey, it's going to be a, $800 repair, but the furnace is 20 years old. Do you want to spend $2,500 and get a new one? Like that's a decision that I should be involved with. But a lot of the day-to-day stuff, like, what are you going to say? No, no, you can't use your toilet, right? No, you can't. Like, of course you got to fix those things. So you just got to, trust that they're making repairs to the best of their ability and doing it the right way.
What is the typical rate that they charge management companies? I know it's all over the board, different companies. Is there kind of a standard that you look for?
No, and you get what you pay for. So even the most recent property manager wanted to offer us a lower rate, and I didn't think that was fair. So I actually told her that we would pay her standard rate because I didn't want subpar service, right? I'd rather pay you a little bit more and make sure my properties are taken care of and done right. So I would say 8% is about standard, give or take 2%. If you have a larger portfolio, you might see 6%. If it's in a more rural area, you might see 10%.
So a lot of what you've said, there's so many ins and outs of this, right? And if it's somebody who's buying their first property, just getting started, it's a great way to achieve home ownership and then also start your investment portfolio. But I think a lot of people watch like these shows on TV, these real estate shows, and it just looks so fun and easy and glamorous.
It does look fun. It is not fun.
It's so easy, but you really have to roll your sleeves up. You really have to be savvy and know what you're doing. So if somebody was just getting started in house hacking, how do they get this knowledge that you have? I know a lot of it is just trial and error, but what's the best way for somebody to get involved in this and make sure that they do have money set aside for vacancies, or they do have money set aside to replace furnaces and know all the ins and outs, so they don't, just to help our audience avoid some of those challenges?
So I mean, honestly, you have to find a really good investor agent. An investor agent should help you run these sort of numbers and plan and be able to answer all your questions too, but also like plan for future expenses. That's what our job is, right? Is to make sure that you're making the right investment. So anyone that's new should definitely find an investor friendly agent, at least in my opinion. But then again, a lot of it you learn along the way. So one of my clients decided to get licensed and then came to work for me. So he's been working for me for about 6 years now. And his first property, he house hacked, and he wanted to learn the renovation process. So he wanted to learn to hang drywall, and he wanted to learn to tile floors, but it took him a year to renovate his unit, and then he went on to the second one and thought to himself, now I've kind of know what things, right? What things are worth my time to do and what things are worth hiring out. And then, he went through all 3 units and did less and less along the way, but got more experience. And I can tell you, he will never hang drywall ever again. It is a very tedious. And you have to be a perfectionist to do it right. Otherwise it looks terrible. So it's not like a beginner DIY type thing. So it's, learning those sort of things. And then also YouTube. There you can literally YouTube anything. It's fantastic. Half my landlording stuff I learned from YouTubing. And so my rule is like if I YouTube something and the videos are less than 3 minutes, then it's a DIY project. If they're 20-minute videos, that is not a DIY project, and I do not want to do it myself. That's my personal rule.
That's a good rule. I'm going to write that one
I
down.
love that so much. So many people getting into this, and especially on the first property or two, like you started, where you purchase the duplex, you move into one side, you try to renovate the other. Usually by the second or third one, they're going, I never want to touch any of these
Yeah.
projects again. I'm tired of doing dishes in the bathtub for a month.
It is so much more work than you think it is. And, those shows make it look so easy. And they don't include, like, all those shows typically don't include all of like the holding costs for your loans. So if you're doing a renovation project, you typically need a hard money loan, which is a different type of a loan. If the property is not going to be habitable, and those are very expensive loans. They don't include any of the loan costs. They don't include any of the closing costs. They don't include any of the agent fees. So they boast these, huge profits and don't realize that half of that is going to costs or holding costs or fees. And it took, 6 months, not 30 minutes. Right.
Right.
And they've got a network of people that are there to help them. And it's just not that easy.
Yeah, they didn't get the phone call or somebody didn't show up for 2 weeks and you had to try and find it. Yeah.
It happens.
Sorry, Angel. Yeah.
Because for some reason, on every single job site and every single project, some contractor gets a nail in his tire and doesn't show up. I don't know why, but that is like the most common excuse. Oh man, my car won't start today. I can't make it to work. Happens all the time. All the time.
You mentioned when you're getting started in the house hacking business that you should have a good investor agent. What are some of the things that you would look for when you are shopping for an investor agent?
It's a really great question. I like to test my suggestion is to test them, which essentially is, hey, I'm looking in the Charlotte market, right? I want to spend $700,000 on an investment property. Can you show me 3 examples of what you think I should buy? Right. And leave it at that. Right. And that's how actually, so when I started in Chicago market, I moved also to the Milwaukee market. But when I was exploring other markets, that's what I did. I was looking at Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Indianapolis. I planned a weekend. I called 3 different agents in each market, said, hey, I'm coming down next weekend or whatever. I want to spend X amount of dollars in the next year. I'm not familiar with the area at all. So can you show me 3 properties, at least 3 properties that you think I should buy and why? And it was a really awesome learning experience because they all had very different areas and very different ideas of what would make a good investment. So I got to learn the markets real quick and figure out what worked best for me. But even said, any clients that come to me, that's the first question I ask. What's your budget and what do you think you want? I always ask, what do you think you want? Because what you might want is not actually realistic. So then said, I've got, I analyze, every single property, every single day, 3 times a day for the last 10 years. I've got hundreds of Excels of properties I've run numbers on. So when they tell me what they think they want, in my head, I'm thinking of, okay, I saw that property 3 months ago. That might fit what they think they want. And then I'm able to send them over Excel sheets of breaking down the expenses. Hey, here's what your mortgage payment's going to be. Here's what your expenses are going to be. Here's what your profit's going to be, your cash on cash, your cap rate. And then we talk through those. So then they're able to see, we look through the pictures, right? And these can be sold properties, closed properties, expireds, whatever. They don't need to be new ones or active, but just showing them examples of, if you think that these are okay, then I can probably find you something in the next 6 months. Right. But if you're looking at these properties and these numbers being like, oh, I would never spend that kind of money for that kind of property, or I would never want that kind of return, then it's probably not the right market for you. And so it really helps establish essentially a baseline from the very beginning of, here's what's realistic and here's what you can expect by using actual properties, actual pictures, actual numbers and examples.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah,
That
I
is so
love that so
good.
much. So informative.
Thanks.
That's a really neat way to vet someone.
Yeah, that's a great way to manage expectations too. You should write a book about that.
I am writing a book.
What?
But my book is teaching agents how to work with investors.
On house hacking specifically, or just investors
Tell
across
us
the
a
Investors in
board?
little bit
general.
about it. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is exciting. So I said I do a lot of public speaking in the investor community. So I've spoken at Bigger Pockets conference. I've done a bunch of podcasts. I've spoken at the Best Ever conference. And on the investor side of things, it's a very common complaint that they just like don't like agents. So they, especially newer investors will go to an agent and say, I'm looking for investment properties, and they will just set them up on an MLS feed, right? And they don't know what they're doing. They don't know if this is a good deal, right? They don't know if what the vacancy rates are. So I surveyed investors and found that 60% of them said they went through at least 4 real estate agents or never found a good real estate agent that works with investors. So again, it's something that I've heard them complain about years and years in the community, is how hard it is to find a good investor agent. So then I surveyed realtors and found that 70% of them said that less than 10% of their business is investors. So I'm like, hey, there's a disconnect here. 25% of home sales are investors. So they're buying up a quarter of the market, but less than 10% of agents, or less than 30% of agents, are actually working with them. So that's why I decided to kind of write a book and a training program to hopefully bridge the gap, because I said it's a different world, it's a different lingo, it's a different mindset. So hopefully it helps some people bridge that gap and make it less stressful for everyone.
That would be a great certification for realtors to get, to
Yeah,
be an investment certified realtor. That would be great knowledge for them to have and a great way to represent that portion of the market.
absolutely.
We can't wait for the book to come out. You'll have to keep us posted.
I will. It should be out probably in January.
Oh, that's right away. It's
That
coming
is a
right
few
up.
weeks away, isn't it?
Yeah,
Wow.
Yes.
it's right around the corner. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I had another question pop into my mind, going back a little bit to the property management. So when you bought your first property, and I imagine a lot of people when they're buying theirs, they're just getting into the real estate world and manage that property themselves.
Yeah,
Did you do that? Like
I
you'd
still do.
come
Yeah.
home and you'd still be at work, right? Like the tenants would come knocking on your door. Was that how can you manage that stress of being at home, but having your tenants come right to you where you live?
So that never actually happened.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I still manage all my Chicago properties. I still self-manage. So said the first one we lived in from 2011 to 2013, and then we moved back in 27 to 2019. No one never knocked on my door. Never once. They're usually quite respectful of boundaries and texting. Everyone texts now. No one wants to talk to a person face to face anymore.
That's true.
So they will text, right? And say like, hey, I've got this issue. This needs to be handled. I said, I still manage those properties now. And I have tenants that moved in May. Haven't heard from them ever once. Never talked to them, never messaged me, nothing. And then all of a sudden, like this week, they message like, hey, our dishwasher's not draining. We're having problems with our sink draining now too. So I had a plumber come out. And then a couple days later, they messaged me that their heat is no longer working. And then the same day, they afternoon, like, wait, our dishwasher's not working again. So I had a plumber out, a furnace guy, and a appliance repair guy all within 10 days. I'm like, I don't think I've ever even met you since you guys moved in like 6 months ago. And then all of a sudden these 3 things happen. So that is definitely one of the downsides of self-managing is, so you have to be able to determine if something's an emergency or not, right? Obviously, like heat is out. I had my guy there in 90 minutes. That's something that needs immediate attention. Dishwasher not draining, right? That could probably wait 24 hours before you try to schedule someone. That's not an emergency. But again, there's, definitely things that have happened. My someone plugged up something in the laundry room and it flooded the whole laundry room, which then was going into my tenant's unit. My baby was like 6 months old and he was, screaming and nursing. So I brought him with me. I had to bring him to this apartment. I bought him like a little bouncy thing while I was, because like water was coming in the apartment and needed to be handled immediately, and had a wet vac and was cleaning it up because it was a Sunday and no one that I knew was working on Sundays that could be there fast enough before it damaged more of the unit. I had tenants one time when I was pregnant with my daughter. We did live upstairs. They came home. They saw a little bit of water on the floor of the utility room. It was like maybe 9 o'clock at night. And they're like, oh, she's pregnant. We'll let her sleep. It's not a big deal. And woke up the next morning and their entire apartment was flooded. So the hot water heater broke, and as it was leaking out the bottom, it was filling in because no one turned the water off. And what would have been a $1,500 hot water heater repair was like over $5,000 in water damage. So there's definite problems where if I had an emergency property manager, right, that could handle these things. When I travel, I do keep an emergency. We do have an emergency system in place. But 95% of the time it's easily manageable and no one's ever knocked on my doors.
Well, and again, I think a lot of that goes back to you're a realtor who knows this market, knows what to expect from it. And I think what you said is so important for investors or anyone looking to get into this aspect of real estate. Really does need to rely on somebody who's got this wealth of knowledge, like clearly you do, and make sure that they don't think that it looks like a show that they've seen on TV where it's just all easy and peasy.
It's definitely not easy.
And house hacking doesn't seem like it's for everybody, but it seems like you really know what you're doing and you've done a great job with it. So good for you.
And I love it still. Said I've been, a landlord for 12 years now. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Well, the good news is there's something in real estate for everybody, and a good realtor will help everybody find that. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I've learned tons. I think everybody here has, right? And how interesting. And I'm gonna look way more into this, and I can't wait to find your book, Brie. When that comes out, how will people find you?
You can follow me on social media. My handle is Chicago Brie across all platforms. That's CHICAGO BRIE, and you can just follow me, and I will let you know when it's released.
Well, fantastic. And we wish you all the best with your real estate business and the book. We would love to have you back and talk more about that.
Sure.
So go around and have everybody let our audience know where they can find us. Angela?
Thank you. I'm so glad that I was here today. I learned so much about house hacking and I have so many questions. So I can't wait for Brie's book to come out. I'm Angela Brown. I am with Savvy Cleaner. I'm the CEO of Savvy Cleaner. We train house cleaners and maids. I'm in the Charlotte, North Carolina market, and you can find me on all the social medias at Ask Angela Brown.
Thanks, Angela, for being with us today and all those great questions. And Aaron, where can our audience find you?
Yes, and Brie, thank you so much for being here today. That was so insightful and so much great information. So thank you.
Thanks.
As far as myself, realtor out of San Antonio, Texas, you can find me at Ask Aaron Brown on any of the social platforms. And I look forward to working with you if you're in the area. And if you're out of the area, I look forward to a referral and working with your clients and here for you. So.
Thanks, Aaron. And I'm Brooke Bryant. I'm in the Charlotte, North Carolina and surrounding areas. And you can find me on all my social media platforms are Ask Brooke Bryant. And would love to help you in the Charlotte area and surrounding areas, and learned so much about house hacking today. I do love working with investors, but have not done this yet. And so looking forward to Brie's book and learning more about it and following you on social media, Brie, and see all the fun. And you've got some fascinating stories to tell. So I can't wait to learn more about those. But we really want to thank you for joining us today and sharing this information with our audience about how to get involved in real estate investing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
This was lots of fun, and we'll see everybody here next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, you guys.